In this problem, I'll be showing how to do order of operations that will involve parentheses or brackets, exponents, multiplication, division, addition, and subtraction. For example, in this problem, I see multiplication, I see an exponent, and I see addition. I'm going to work out thoroughly 3 problems in this video, but before I work out those 3 problems in detail, I'd like to look at 3 problems and just talk about the order in which I would do things. So the order in which you do operations, you probably heard of Pemdas, P-E-M-D-A-S, and some people have you remember Pemdas by remembering the mnemonic, please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, which means that you do any parentheses or brackets in a problem first, then exponents, and then it turns out that the multiplication and division are actually on the same level. Now you do perform them left to right, but notice that I wrote Pemdas with the M and the D vertically to indicate that they're on the same level, meaning that you can switch the order of these depending on which one's on the left. And then the addition and subtraction are on the same level as well. Notice that I grouped them in the same group down here, meaning that sometimes you actually do subtraction before addition. What you can go by is which one is on the left you would do first. So addition and subtraction can be switched depending on which one's on the left and which one's on the right. And I put them vertically, just like I did the MD, on the same level to remind you that sometimes subtraction comes before addition, just like sometimes division comes before multiplication. So in this problem, I don't see any parentheses or brackets, so I would move down to the next level and look for exponents. I see an exponent here, so the 4 squared would be done first, then any multiplication or division, and I have multiplication by 3, so after doing the 4 squared, I would multiply by the 3. All of this would be done, and then the only thing left would be to do the addition. Let's look at these 2 problems. And I will not show them in detail, but I will talk about the order in which you do things. So you start by looking for parentheses or brackets, and I see parentheses right here. So I would perform the operation inside the parentheses first, which is subtraction. I would say 9 subtract 2 is 7. Once that's done, I would do the next step, which is exponents. So that 7 I just got would be squared. And then finally after that, I would do the subtraction, which is at the lower level, in this order, and it would be the last thing that you would do in that problem. Now let's ignore this and move on to this one, and this is the last one that I will do by just showing the order of operations without actually showing you the answer in detail. So starting with parentheses or brackets, there's actually no parentheses or brackets with operations inside them. I see parentheses here, but there's no operator inside. This is just showing me that the sign on the 6 is negative. That's not a subtraction symbol. And likewise here, this is showing that the sign on the 6 is negative. That is not a subtraction symbol. So there's no operations inside the parentheses. So I would skip this and move on to exponents. And I do see an exponent. So that exponentiation would happen first. Then, once my exponents were done, I would do any multiplication or division. And I do see implied multiplication there. So that would be done next. Once you did your exponentiation and your multiplication, what you'd have left is that subtraction and that subtraction. I wouldn't have any more multiplication or division, and you would do that subtraction left to right, meaning you would perform this operation first, and then you would do the second operation of subtraction second here. I'd like to work this problem out in detail. In fact, I will end up working out 3 in detail. Before I start the problem here, I may want to highlight my operations. For example, there is no symbol between this 6 and these set of parentheses, which implies multiplication in there. And as promised, we will highlight all the operators in this problem. So we have multiplication here. We have an exponent of 2, which is an operation. We have addition, and we have division, so we have 4 operations to perform, and we will use Pemdas to guide the order in which we perform them. So first off, you might look for any parentheses or brackets, and I do see some parentheses. However, I don't see any operations inside the parentheses. Inside the parentheses, you just have a -3 and a -8. there's no operations inside there, so I will move on to the next level. And the next level would be, after parentheses and brackets, would be the E in Pemdas, and that would be exponents. So I will perform the exponent first. And the negative 3 is being raised to the exponent of 2. So I am going to perform that operation and copy down the answer. Now, negative 3 squared means that you have negative 3 multiplied by itself, and negative 3 times negative 3 is 9. So where I see negative 3 squared, I'm going to write the number 9, and then just continue to copy the rest of the problem, for example, the 6, and then that multiplication. Now that I've copied the rest of the problem, I notice that there are no more exponents in the problem, so I'm done with exponents. So next I will look for any multiplication or division, and I would just simply start on the left of the problem and move to the right. And already starting on the left I see a multiplication problem. 6 times 9 is 54. So I will take the 6 times 9 and write it as 54 and simply copy the rest of the problem. So far I've done 2 of the original 4 operations. And I may still be on the level of multiplication and division. So starting on the left of the problem and moving all the way to the right, looking for multiplication and division. I have addition and then I have division. So since I have division, I will do it before the addition, because division always comes before addition, regardless if it's on the left or the right. So I will perform this operation and simply copy the rest of the problem. So copying the 54, I have 48 divided by negative 8. 48 divided by 8 is 6. And the signs were different. This was a positive 48 and negative 8. So the answer comes out to be negative. And I still have to copy that last operator of addition. So now I'm just left with 54 being added to negative 6. Because the 6 is negative, that means my answer will be smaller than 54. So taking 54 and moving 6 in the negative direction would put me at a positive 48. And that would be the answer to my problem. Here is another example I'd like to do. And like all problems, I will start on the left of the problem and go through the entire problem looking for any parentheses or brackets. So the first set of parentheses I see are here. The second set are here. However, there's no operations to perform inside those parentheses. I simply have a negative 7. So I won't consider them being a parentheses for which I have to take care of. However, I do have to do what's inside the parentheses here first. So it's as if you are to just pay attention to this problem and ignore the rest temporarily. How would you do that problem looking inside the parentheses? Well, inside these parentheses are no more grouping symbols, meaning inside these parentheses I don't have more parentheses or brackets. So inside these parentheses I would move down the line to exponents, and sure enough I see an exponent, so that exponentiation would be done first. After I do that, I will still have another operation inside the parentheses. In fact, I have 2 operations inside the parentheses. I have the exponent and the subtraction. But because both those operators are in the parentheses, I will do both the exponents and then the subtraction before doing the rest of the problem. So let me copy the 5, the minus 3. The implied multiplication here needs to be copied. There's no operator between the 3 and the parentheses, which means it's multiplication. You actually can do the problem without writing the dot. This is where I do the first operation within the parentheses. 4 squared is 16, and then I'm going to continue to copy the rest of the problem down. So take a moment to notice that I copied the entire problem. The only change I made was that 4 squared means 4 times 4, or 16. So that's the first operation to do. I still have the subtraction, the multiplication, this subtraction, and this subtraction to take care of. So originally there were 5 operations. I've done one of them, the exponent. So I have 4 left to do, and I've highlighted those 4. Now be careful, I'm still not done with parentheses, because I have this set of parentheses here for which I must do first. So I'm going to copy the 5, the subtract 3, and the implied multiplication that was there. And I'm simply going to say that 16 subtract 6 now. I'll perform that, say that's 10. and I still have to copy the subtraction of the negative 7. Now I'm left with the operations of subtraction, multiplication, and subtraction, which means I'm done with parentheses and brackets, I'm done with exponents. Now I must do multiplication and division before I move on to addition and subtraction. So that's why the M and the D come before the A and the S. Remembering that multiplication and division are on the same level, I would just perform them left to right. But looking at my problem, I only see multiplication and subtraction left, and because multiplication always comes before subtraction, I will do it first. So I'm going to think of this as being 3 times 10, and I will just copy down everything else in the problem. I will copy the 5, the subtraction symbol. This is where I'll say that 3 times 10 is 30, and then copy the rest of the problem. The only operations left in the problem is this subtraction, and since they're the same operation, notice that you do that from left to right. So I will do the 5 minus the 30 first, because that operation is further to the left than this one is, and 5 subtract 30 is negative 25, and then I would just copy the rest of the problem. Now I'm left with only one operation. I am to take the number negative 25 and subtract the number negative 7. So the only operation left is this one subtraction here. And you could think of negative 25 subtracting negative 7 as negative 25 being added to a positive 7. If you want to write that down, you could. Negative 25. I'm going to change the subtraction to addition and then change the sign on the negative 7 to positive 7. So if you were at 25 units in the negative direction and moved 7 units in the positive direction, that would put you at negative 18. Would be my final answer. Keep watching the video as I'm going to do one more example. This is the last example I'd like to show of this kind, and I'm going to start by looking at my operations. I have subtraction here, I have subtraction here, I have an exponent here, and hopefully you notice that I have no symbol written here, which means that there's multiplication there. So if you wanted to highlight your operations, I have subtraction here, I have multiplication, I have an exponent, and then I have subtraction here. These two symbols here and here are not subtraction, they are just to show that the signs on the 9 and the 3 are negative. So I'm going to start with looking for any parentheses or brackets. And hopefully you notice that this set of parentheses doesn't count, so to speak, because there are no operations to perform inside of that set of parentheses or that set of parentheses, and the same goes for this one. So here, this set of parentheses, this one, and finally this one really isn't represented by the P here in Pemdas, because the P in Pemdas really only says that you must perform operations inside the parentheses first, and there are no operations inside those parentheses. However, there is a set of parentheses here and there with operations inside of it. In fact, there's exponents and subtraction inside of it. So it says that I must perform these operations first, regardless what these are. So it's as if you were supposed to just pay attention to this problem first, work it out as an entirety, and ignore this for a while until you're done doing that. Once all the operations inside of those parentheses are performed, then we will take care of this business out here. So let's do that. Let me copy this down, the negative 3, the subtraction, the negative 4, and if you want, I'll copy down that multiplication, even though you don't need to. Inside the parentheses, I need to make a decision because there's two operations as to which to do first. But the fact that these are in parentheses means I ignore all of this. Inside the parentheses I have an exponent and subtraction, and exponents always come before subtraction because the E in Pemdas comes before the S in Pemdas, meaning do exponents before you do any subtraction. So I'm going to do the exponentiation. 2 to the third power means that you have 2 being multiplied by itself 3 times, or that you have 3 factors of 2. Well, 2 times 2 is 4, and then multiply that by 2, you get 8. So where I see 2 cubed here, I am going to write the number 8, and then copy the subtraction here, and then copy the negative 9. Now I still have a set of parentheses here with an operation in between them. Again, these parentheses don't count, so to speak, because there's no operations inside them. Those symbols are just the sign on the numbers inside the parentheses. So now I have to perform the only operation there is to perform in parentheses, so I'm still on the P in Pemdas. So I can copy the rest of the problem and work on this operation inside the parentheses. 8 subtract a negative 9 can be thought of as 8 being added to a positive 9, and 8 plus 9 is 17. Just to recap, I'm down to 2 operations. I have subtraction and multiplication. I originally had 4 operations, but since I've already performed the exponent and I just performed the subtraction, I'm down to 2. So I've done parentheses and I'm done with exponents. I must now look at any multiplication or division, and I have subtraction and multiplication in the problem, but multiplication always comes before subtraction. So let me do the multiplication first, meaning I will copy the negative 3 and I will copy the subtraction and simply state that 4 times 17 comes out to be 68, and that since I was taking a negative and multiplying by a positive, the signs were different, so it should have come out a negative 68, and the fact that it's negative means I will put it in parentheses. Finally, the only operation left is the subtraction here, and when you subtract a negative, you can instead think of it as you're adding a positive. In fact, if you want to write that down, think of it as you're changing the subtraction to an addition and then changing the sign on the negative 68 to positive 68. So then you must do negative 3 plus 68. Imagine if you were 3 units to the left of 0 on the real number line and you moved 68 units in the positive direction. That would put you at 65. So 65 is my final answer, and hopefully this video was helpful.